Hey coders, welcome back to Clean Code with Jason. So today's topic it's gonna be about comments and should I say when not to write them. So chapter 4 from Clean Code, it's kind of a spicy one. So let's find out why Uncle Bob calls comments necessary evil. So chapter 4 makes a goal statement. Don't comment bad code, but rewrite it. So we should write code in such a way that we shouldn't be writing comments, but the code should be itself self-explanatory. And Uncle Bob explains that most comments are compensations for poor code, but not it's not like an enhancement. While some comments are necessary, but the goal should be to write code that doesn't need them at all. So this is an important point to note. The goal should be to write code that doesn't need them at all. So we have to write code in such a way that we shouldn't be writing comments unless and until it's necessary. So let's take a look at an example of bad code. Here I'm having an variable age. Let's say, for example, age is equal to 20. If age is greater than 18, let's do some functions. But we are writing a comment over here, check if user is adult, but that kind of doesn't it's kind of a repetitive or we are causing some redundancy over here. But a good way to write is if is adult. So here we can have those conditions if age greater than 18 return true. So here even if this comment is not there, we can understand that this function is going to perform or going to check if the user is an adult or not. So that is the first point. That is do not comments do not make up for bad code. Express intent in code and not in comments. So the first important point to note over here is express intent in code and not in comments. And the second important point we are going to look is explain yourself in the code. So our code should be itself be able to explain what is happening. So let's take an example of bad code. Here I'm having calculate interest, but we have to mention that we are calculating interest over by putting variables like p or t by 100. But in case if you have to write a code like this, calculate simple interest, and we pass in these variables, we are able to understand that okay, so this function is going to calculate a simple interest, but let the logic not be seen, but we are able to understand the gist of what's happening in the function. So one thing that we learned from the point two is the mind readable code is equal to self-explanatory code. So readable code is equal to self-explanatory code. And three, we are going to look at what all stages are we allowed to write comments. A good comment is necessary when we need legal headers, clarification for complex rejects, or warning of some consequences, or to-dos if tracked properly. Probably like if you have to achieve a function, maybe there are some steps or some setup need to be done. So there you can comment all those necessary steps. So here we can see an example of where a comment is actually necessary. Here we can add a comment just to understand that what are all these H's, S's are going to mean for these rejects over here. Now next we are going to look at what are like where we can avoid bad codes where there's mumbling, example like handle stuff or it does this, it does that. And, maybe sometimes we are incrementing some value, but I think that's probably mostly be understandable when we are trying to add a value into it, right? So we don't have to mention such comments. It becomes redundancy. Sometimes misleading contradicts the code, or let's say we are adding a noise like we need Java docs for the private methods, or For example, for an Python code, we are just mentioning that this is a private code for this such stuff. These are kind of an extra noise because by the way we write function, it should be self-explanatory itself. And the most important part is commented out code. We should never ever have some dead codes in our application. And the fifth most important point to learn from this chapter is replace functions with variables. So for example, if we are taking a first function, user is admin on order. So we are going to check if user or role is admin or user.id is equal to dog.owner ID. So if the user is admin on order, we are trying to check over here. But instead of writing code like this, if you can write a simple code where it says that if a user can edit the code or not. So based on role-based access, we can have a function name. We can pass in the variables or parameters we want, and we can make a clean code. So we don't even have to write all these comments. But by looking at these, we can understand if can edit document. So that's how you avoid comments but make proper meaningful functions. And let's take a look at another example. This is a bad comment. Returns a list of even numbers from list. Okay, but if you can just rename the function name to filter even numbers as parameters, we are able to understand from this function itself that we are going to filter out even numbers. So we don't even have to write all these extra comments, right? So the most or the final thing, the moral of this code is name it right, skip the comment. So that's chapter 4 wrapped. Remember, good code speaks for itself. Comment should be a last resort, not your first reflex. Hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for chapter 5 formatting.